Want to trade with Rithika? Join Chase at www.laductrading.com/chase.
You had a great week. So last week we couldn't really get above that 6,000 level, 5989, and we couldn't stay above 5,900 either. We're kind of stuck in a no man's land, I would say, for the past few weeks. If you go to the weekly chart, you'll be able to see that we did not an inside week. We did break the previous high, but we came back in. So we've kind of been sideways for 3 weeks. Not perfectly, but we have been digesting. So the market is stuck with one of two moves. You can see here, if I draw this trend line all the way from April, you can see this has held as a level of support. So if I was bearish for a gap fill here in the market, ideally, I would break this 5853. If that breaks, then I think this 5750 and 5700 into 5641 should retest pretty easily. Alternatively, if this trend line holds a support and we do end up bouncing this way, again, like I said, the 6,000 has been where we have been rejecting right in the market. So ideally, if we break 6,000, then we can get confirmation of going up to make another high. So all that would ideally be dependent on the wicks. Here on the wicks, you can see that we are rejecting the bottom of the trend line here. So I'm not really expecting any major moves, any major sells in the market unless we get over 24 on wicks. I still expect us to reject and come back into that 13.5 and $11 level eventually on the wicks. And you look at the dollar as well, you'll be able to see that we have pushed into 102, which is like resistance. We're coming back down into that 97, maybe if that super breaks 95. So that is allowing equities to remain elevated. In the market, IWM, again, we went up to that 207. We couldn't break above into the next range. So we are still stuck sideways. We would need over that 207, 210 to push back up into that 220 level. Again, we do have a gap to fill lower. So if we were to break like 205, maybe we come back into 190 and even 185. But yeah, kind of have to wait and watch how the market plays out. So with all that being said, let's look at this week's watch list. First one that I have is Apple, and we have been sideways for like 6-7 weeks. May not be this week, but as long as we hold this range of 190, still think we're going to move back to the top of the range, which is 215, break that and push back into 231. So my primary assumption is that Apple will hold up to the bullish momentum and continue to the upside. I would, again, have to become bearish if the market breaks down. So this trend line here is support. So if we do end up breaking this 185, I would say if we break this 189, 185 level, then Apple is in a lot of trouble. We probably come back into that 160. And if that breaks, then we have a much lower range. But yeah, for now, I still think that this ends up breaking bullishly. Let's see. We'll adapt to the market. The next one I have is PDD. And so given that we did gap up on good earnings, it's only fair that we gap down on bad earnings, but that leaves us with two gaps in the market, one to the upside. So I will give you two pivots. If you break 194, we're coming into 87 and going to fill this gap at 78.70. And if you can break over 103, then you can go back and fill your upside gap at 113. So we're kind of stuck with two gaps on the upside and on the downside. So given that the most recent news was bad news, I would say should ideally come down to fill its downside gap before it moves any higher, but you never know with this market. Can fly on any news. So yeah, there's that. Last but not least, I guess we should look at Bitcoin before we look at MSTR. You can see that pretty much ended up bouncing off the bottom of the channel, having a bit of digestion. See, you're having a bit of digestion. So I still expect us to continue pushing to the top of that channel with a little bit of digestion. Still expecting Bitcoin to continue. Any sell will likely get bought, and we will continue moving to the upside. With that being discussed, you can see here that MSTR, for example, is on support. So you stay over 460. We have a gap to fill at 400 at least. Ideally, we will push into that 400 gap, digest before we go higher. But if we break 370, then next support is at 330. So those are your two levels on MSTR. So I am like Bitcoin. We have pushed sideways for 3 days. So ideally we move back into that 400 level unless we super sell on Monday, which brings 330 and maybe even 300 into the question. But we'll have to see. The market really doesn't have a lot of volume right now, so we're just moving on small momentum. Thank you so much. Have a great week.
Join Chase to trade with Rithika and other experts. Subscribe to LaDuc Trading YouTube channel for more Wolf's weekly wave list videos and other content.